Hello, everybody, and welcome to Sake Revolution. This is America's first sake podcast. That's right, you found it. I am your host, John Puma from the Sake Notes, also the administrator over at the Internet Sake Discord. Do stop down and have a drink with us sometime. And the guy on the show who is most notably, and definitely not today, a sake samurai.
And I am your host, Timothy Sullivan. I am a sake samurai, a sake educator, as well as the founder of the Urban Sake website. And every week, John and I will be here tasting and also chatting about all things sake and doing our best to make it fun and easy to understand.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Yes.
So, Tim, this is going to be an interesting one, I think. It's going to be interesting because I know very little about this topic, about this specific type of sake.
Yeah.
This is something, this episode, this was your idea.
Yeah. Guilty as charged.
Guilty as charged. You went and found the sake.
I did.
And I'm kind of along for the ride, I think. I'm ready to get educated. You're a sake educator, and I am ready to get educated today.
Well, I'll start off by saying what we're going to be tasting today. I've heard the production of this type of sake is less than 1% of all sake made.
So this is the 1%.
This
or
is
the less
the
than
1%.
1%. The less than 1%.
This is the Jeff Bezos of sake.
The Jeff Bezos of sake. Oh, wait, centrifuge.
No.
We told everybody we were doing an episode on that.
The other 1%.
The other 1%. Okay.
Yes.
Yes. So, Tim, can you tell the folks at home, our intrepid listeners, what is this rarefied sake that we're going to be talking about today?
Yes. Today we're talking all things Koshu. I know you've heard that term before. Koshu.
Oh, I know Koshu. I mean, I know of Koshu. I don't
Yes.
get a lot of Koshu, but I'm aware of it.
That would tie in with that only 1%.
Yeah,
Koshu.
very much so.
There's a few layers that we have to dig into here. The term Koshu is what you're going to hear most often. And that, if you literally translate the words Koshu, that means old sake.
That checks out. Great. Wonderful visit to the Sake Education Corner. We can go home now.
See, that was easy.
Yeah,
Who said sake
all right.
is difficult? Yes, so the everyday colloquial term for sake that is aged is Koshu. But I don't know if you can put yourself in the shoes of some of the brewers out there that make the most exquisite sakes in the world. They lager them for 10 years plus, and then they get this label, old sake. Doesn't roll off the tongue as it should.
No, I mean, it literally is old sake, though.
Literally. But there's another term that we use, Jukuseishu. Jukuseishu. This sounds a little more elegant, a little more refined. That literally means aged sake or matured sake. And then there's a more formal term, Choki Jukuseishu. Choki Jukuseishu. That is long-term aged sake. And that kind of has the most formal feel to it.
It definitely sounds formal.
Yes.
Long-term.
Aged
I'm sure we'll get into exactly what denotes long-term. Because for people at home who may not be aware, typically sake is not aged in the way that many other alcoholic beverages are. I want to say that for sake, your maturing process, your aging process, like it's a couple of months, right, Tim?
One question I get a lot when I teach sake seminars to consumers is, can you age a sake like you age a wine? And the answer, as always...
I know that one.
The answer is always is yes and no.
Yes. I mean, you can. It's probably not going to have the desired effect. There are some indestructible sakes out there that that age and do well with that, and they can stand up to that kind of thing. But you're and please, if I'm wrong, correct me. Your average run of the mill junmai ginjo is not something that's going to really agree with aging.
if people ask me for a general rule of thumb when it comes to aging sake, the best aged sakes, koshus or jukuseishu that I've had has always been aged by the brewery because they know their sake best. They know the temperature, the time, the method to age their sake. And when they release it, when they ship it in the bottle, that's when it's good for drinking. I've done some experiments aging sake at home. Have you ever tried that? Like having a bottle in the fridge for several years?
I mean, we have a few ongoing projects.
Okay. TBD. Maybe season 3 we can get one of your
exactly.
aged
We'll open up. That's what we should do. We should have like gotten a bottle and like on like the first episode we should have gotten this bottle of something, and then like episode 300 something we'll open it.
Well, if we had only known what we were doing in episode 1.
If we only knew we were going to do more than like a handful of episodes, that's nice.
Yeah. So I've had some homemade koshu go off the rails. Let's say that.
Off the rails. Now,
off the rails. That's not good.
I was about to say, because I've heard off the rails used in various and opposite manners.
No, this is off the rails, falling into the ravine, on flames, crashing, burning.
So what you're saying is you didn't like it?
I didn't like it.
Okay.
Yeah, so I've always taught people and I've always experienced that aging sake, if you're a consumer and you want the best experience with aged sake, is to buy one from the brewery that's been aged by them. And that's really a good way to ensure you're getting what the brewer intended. Now, there's no rules against trying to age something yourself or having fun with that. Knock yourself out if that's what you want to do. But my experience has been it's a little difficult with sake.
All right. Difficult, but not impossible. I think that is something that's best left to the professionals. So we mentioned that aging your own sake, probably not the best idea. And that sake maturation is typically measured in months, not in years. So old koshu, literally old sake. How old are we talking here before it's considered old?
Well, when a brewer makes a regular sake, they're going to ferment that for 30 days, and then that usually hangs out for 3 months to 6 months at the brewery. Then after that, it's going to get pasteurized and bottled and shipped right away. So the majority of sake is aged 3 to 6 months at the brewery before bottling, and that's the standard flow. So the majority of sakes you're going to drink go through that experience. But when we get into what we call koshu or jukuseishu, that generally is understood to be 3 years of maturation at the brewery or longer. So 3 years plus is what most people would consider to be koshu or aged on purpose sake.
And is this aged like in the tank for 3 years? Is it aged in bottles for 3 years? Do those bottles get dusty at their age in the bottle?
Yeah. The majority of breweries that I visited are aging in tank, usually a stainless steel tank in a temperature controlled room. And there's a reason that in tank is generally done over in bottle. When you think of the oxygen exposure to a volume of sake, let's say you have, X number of hundreds of liters of sake, if they're all in their individual bottles spread out, that is not as easy to control as having one tank with X amount of exposure on the top. Everything under the surface is completely protected, and it's easier to control what happens to the sake if it's done in tank. So for reasons of control and getting the exact result you want, the majority of brewers that I've visited and I've talked to have all said they prefer aging in tank.
And did they seal off the top of that tank? Or
Yes, that's right. The fermentation tanks are open. So if you visit a brewery and you go in the fermentation room, it's open and the gases are coming out. But once the fermentation is done, the tanks that we use for aging are sealed and airtight, and usually in a temperature-controlled environment.
Oh, all right. Wonderful.
Yeah.
That is good to know. That's good to know. We've got this other term here, this long-term aged sake.
Yes.
I'm assuming that's more than 3 years then.
I think the three terms we mentioned, Koshu, Jukuseishu, and Choki Jukuseishu, these are all really interchangeable. They're just different levels of how formal you want to be about it.
Oh, okay. I thought the choki was kind of, since that's bolted onto the front of the Jukuseishu, was like, no, we really mean it. It's aged for a while.
The general industry understanding is 3 years or longer at the brewery. But they're just different levels of formal expression.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And what's the oldest?
The oldest Koshu out there?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good question. Well, the oldest Koshu I have ever seen in my travels by far has been in Kyoto. There is a brewery in Kyoto, Masuda Tokubi Shoten. The brand name is Tsuki no Katsura.
Okay.
And they are a very famous brand in Kyoto. They've been around since 1675.
Oof.
So that is 100 years before the Declaration of Independence. And they are so well respected. And the current president's father started laying down sake decades and decades and decades ago. So well over 60, 70 years of these ceramic containers filled with sake. And I got to peek into this room. It's an attic room at the brewery where they have these wax-sealed ceramic containers filled with decades-old sake. It is a treasure, and it is by far the oldest sake I've ever seen aging somewhere. I can't guarantee it's the oldest out there. There might be another brewery with some bottles or tanks somewhere, but as far as I know, Tsuki no Katsura in Kyoto has an amazing treasure of aged sake.
And did you taste it?
No.
No.
It is not. They do periodic releases of this aged sake, and I have never had the pleasure of tasting something that is like decades and decades old, like older than I am. So that's pretty old.
It's pretty old. I didn't want to blow up your spot.
Let me say it for you. Yeah. So they have some of the oldest Koshu, I'm sure. And there's also a bar that I went to in Tokyo that specializes in serving only Koshu.
Only Koshu.
Only Koshu.
Ooh.
So there's a Koshu sake bar in Tokyo as well.
I believe I've heard tell of this place, but
Yeah.
I've never visited.
I went once.
And how was your experience?
It was lovely. It was lovely. It's a very small, like one counter, very traditional Japanese style sake bar. And with Koshu, they had everything kind of out.
Oh, yeah, because you could just do that.
Yeah, because they were aging in front of us. Some in refrigerators, some out on display. Lovely experience. Really, really great.
Very nice. Now, I imagine that when you're aging any kind of item, really, any kind of alcoholic item, the aging is going to lead to kind of more scarcity, and that's going to increase the price. So Koshu is typically a little bit higher. Yeah,
it also has to do with the delay in return on investment. So if you brew a sake and then you age it for 4 years, 5 years, and then you sell it, you've delayed your return on investment for those raw materials and that time. So there is a premium on aged sake, on Koshu. Wow. So it does tend to be more expensive. I would agree with that.
Right. And then I guess the higher you go in age, the more that number goes up.
Yeah.
Now, do we have Koshu today to sip on? I mean, we must.
We do. Yes. And
excellent.
John, before we start, I want to ask you if you went to some event and they said, "Oh, I have a Koshu. I want you to taste it." What pops into your mind? Like for you, what's your understanding of what Koshu is?
My thought when somebody says, "Oh, I want you to taste some Koshu," I'm going to begin bracing for something.
Bracing.
No, you're preparing your mind for what you're going to experience. I don't mean it in a negative way necessarily, but I think of like kind of like a sherry or like an after dinner kind of drink, like something that I'm going to have with probably ice cream or something like that, like a drink to go with dessert.
Okay.
Probably going to be sweet. I'm thinking like caramel, that kind of thing.
Okay. So you think like dark color.
Yeah.
Sweeter in flavor.
Mm-hmm. Typically. I've had a few that were richer in flavor, which kind of reminded me a little bit of like some artisan rums or whiskeys. But those have been pretty rare. Most of the time, I think, kind of sweet.
Yeah, so that is what most people envision when they think of Koshu. I think that's the popular understanding of what Koshu is. Mm-hmm. And the sake we're tasting today is very much in that vein. I wanted to introduce you to a super classic Koshu that is what the majority of people are going to understand Koshu to be. So is it all right if I introduce this sake to you?
Please.
All right. So I picked out a sake from Niigata today. The brand name is Kanbara, and this is known in English as Ancient Treasure.
Ancient Treasure.
Ancient Treasure.
Good name for a Koshu.
Yes. And this is from the Kaetsu Sake Brewery in Niigata, Japan. This Ancient Treasure is a yamahai. Mm-hmm. It's a junmai. It's a genshu. And it's a koshu.
You like to make comments about kitchen sink sakes, but you found a new category to add to this one.
You got it. This is another kitchen sink sake. A little bit of everything going on. So yamahai fermentation starter. Mm-hmm. It's a junmai sake. And it's a genshu, so full strength, no water added. And it's a koshu. Now, let's look at each of these in a little more detail. So first, I'm going to jump right to what we're talking about, the koshu. This sake was aged for 12 years.
I'm sorry, wait, what?
12.
12.
Yes.
I have literally had whiskeys that were younger than this.
Yes. So this is a 12-year aged koshu. And I read on their website that using the yamahai yeast starter method, which we have some previous shows on yamahai if you want to go check those out, that created a higher acid environment, and that higher acid starter sake allowed them to age for 12 years. If this was a lighter, cleaner, quieter sake, 12 years of aging might not benefit it as much. But the fact that it's a genshu, full strength sake, no water added, and also a yamahai style, those two things contribute to this being an age-worthy sake. Now let me give you some of the stats. The rice milling for this junmai was 70%, and the rice used is Yamada Nishiki and Koshi Tanrei.
Koshi Tanrei sounds like a Niigata rice.
Yes, it is. Yes, very good. The SMV, the sake meter value, how sweet or dry the impression is, this is a minus 13.
Wow.
That's pretty low. So that means this will probably give us a sweeter impression. And another barrier-busting stat here, acidity, 3.1.
That is alarmingly high.
Yes. So our acidity is normally ranking somewhere between 1.0 and 2.0. So this goes off the chart and then a little bit further.
Gets it.
And our alcohol
burns
our
the
alcohol our alcohol is 17.2%.
I believe it.
High alcohol as well. And if all of that, John, if all of that was not enough to make this an interesting sake, I have one more fact for you.
I'm ready.
Regarding the Kanbara ancient treasure. So 99% of the rice used, that Yamada Nishiki and Koshi Tanrei together, is koji rice. So normally, have you ever heard of all koji sake before?
Have.
This isn't basically, except for 1%, this is an all koji sake as well.
Oh, wow.
So 99% of the rice that was used to brew this sake had koji mold grown on it. Normally, that percentage is only 20%. That is standard.
Wow.
But they wanted that extra umami and lift and sweetness. So 99% of the rice used was given the koji mold treatment. Phew, that was a lot.
Yeah, so typically when you've got two different rices in your sake, you're using one of them for the koji and the other one for the starch component, the kakemai. Yeah. This is 99% koji. What are they doing here?
Well, honestly, I don't know for sure, but I'm assuming here that Yamada Nishiki and the Koshi Chanrei were both had koji grown on them, and they're both used. So we're gonna go with our assumption there. And then I confirmed that this sake was aged in tank for 12 years. This is not bottle or barrel aging or anything like that. This was aged in tank, and that refers to a stainless steel tank, so completely neutral. Now, after that momentous introduction, you have your sample and I have my sample.
I do.
So, John, before we started, I asked you to take your bottle out of the fridge so that things can warm up a little bit. Koshu is actually really, really great to enjoy closer to room temperature.
Well, I took it out about an hour ago, or maybe an hour and a half. So I think it has probably gotten pretty close. It's probably not quite room temperature. It's probably around there. So this is a different kind of sake, a different style of sake. We like to recommend people use wine glasses for their sake. Do you still recommend wine glasses for this, or do you think maybe like a highball glass, a whiskey sniffer? Like, what am I doing for this? Because this is very different and very unique.
So I'm using a wine glass, red wine glass, and you could use a brandy snifter for this. You could use a Beaujolais glass, something with a big bowl to it. Ooh. That would be wonderful. But any vessel with a bowl to it is going to be perfect. So wine glass is absolutely A-okay.
Wonderful.
So I'm going to go ahead and pour mine from the bottle now. Okay. So let's look at this in the glass. What colors are you seeing, John? 12-year aged.
So this is very, very amber. This looks you could mistake this for scotch.
Yeah, it looks like whiskey. It could be brandy in the glass. It is a amber color. I still have some lightness here. Like it's bright and it's not dark and opaque. You can see through it, but it is a lovely brandy or whiskey cast to it. Really lovely orangish color.
Yeah.
Really unique. This has to be one of the most unique sakes we've ever tasted.
Yeah, I would say definitely. It's got to be. Just the years by themselves, like the 12-year aging all alone is probably makes it the most unique sake we've had.
All right. Well, let's give it a smell.
Ooh. There is a lot going on there.
Intensely complex.
Woo.
So with so much going on. We've got the koji element, the yamahai element, the higher alcohol element, and 12 years of careful and judicious aging going on here. This is a very rare style of sake, it goes without saying. And when you see this color, this dark color, where does that come from? Why did it turn this color? And I want people to think about toast, actually.
Toast.
Toast.
Okay, I'm thinking about toast.
Yeah. So we have this thing called the Maillard effect, where when you heat sugars, they turn brownish like toast. So you have white bread, put it in a toaster, it turns brown and delicious. And the same thing can happen with long-term aging and sake. So you get this almost caramelization effect to the sugars that are in the sake. This happens more consistently and more readily at room temperature. So I'm going to venture that this sake was aged in tank at room temperature. Now, I want to mention briefly before we taste that there are some sakes that are called a Koshu or a Jukuseishu, and they're aged at very, very cold temperatures. They do not turn as dark whiskey-like as this sake. They're going to remain more clear and more true to their original color because the low temperature aging is going to slow down that Maillard effect or that caramelization of the sugars. Yeah, so let's give it a smell again. So I pick up on mushroom and also caramel smells.
Yeah, a lot of caramel in here.
Yeah, and it does smell toasted, right? Like a little bit toasty.
It's kind of difficult to describe. It smells warming.
Warming, yes.
Which again is something that I often associate with those darker liquors as well.
Yeah, so this has definitely like a caramelized feeling to it on the aroma. A little bit toasted, a little bit umami driven. There's really deep and complex aromatics going on here.
Yeah, there's a ton going on here. Yeah. I mean, between all the things that have gone on with the sake, which is the 99% koji rice, the fact that it's a yamahai, that it's genshu, it hasn't been diluted, and then in the 12 years. Crazy.
But when I smell a sake like this, you mentioned this earlier when you said what your impression of Koshu was in general. I think of digestive, after dinner drink.
Yeah.
It has that type of warming. It's a type of sake you're going to sip in small amounts and maybe not gulp down on the sofa after work.
No, I don't think that's going to fall into this category at all.
All right. Well, I'm really curious. Let's give this a taste. Okay. Wowza. So I taste the acidity. Like I'm greeted by acidity with this sake.
This is weird. Because the acidity brings it a certain amount of brightness.
Brightness,
and
yes.
You're not supposed to have brightness in something that's 12 years old. So this is it's like takes my head a moment to like wrap around what just happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is I've never tasted a Koshu that tastes like this.
Yeah.
It's definitely
Super
adjacent
unique.
to other Koshus I've had. Like it's got that deep, complex flavor. It is sweet. It has that after dinner style to it. But there's something else also, and that's that acidity, I think.
So the acidity is there for me, greeting you right up front. And for me, I don't know if you can taste this, John, but there's something smoky in there as well. Do you get like a hint of something smoky on the finish? Like for me, it ties in with that caramelization, like a little hint of a smoky flavor as well on the finish.
I get more of a toastiness than I do a smokiness.
Yeah.
I'm not getting smoke so much. When I think of smoke, I'm thinking of how it applies to other dark liquors, and that's not what I'm getting here. But I got like a roasted something that's in there. It's really interesting. It's very different.
Yeah, I think we're picking up on the same trail there. For me, it's coming across as a little smoky, but it can be also toasty and caramelized as well.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely umami. Like I'm almost thinking like even hints of mushroom or a little bit of nuttiness as well.
The roasting Yes, there's a cooked nut quality to it, or like a sesame.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's it.
I've never had anything like this.
Yeah, it is super unique.
Yeah.
But for me, this is in the whiskey category. Like if you're a whiskey lover and you give someone who's a whiskey lover, you give them this sake, they're going to flip out, I think. Like, this is amazing.
I think they'd have that. I didn't know sake could do this reaction.
Right.
Which I think is it's a good thing. Show people that sake can do more than what most people assume sake can do.
Yeah. And this is why I love sake so much. Am I going to drink this every day of my life? No.
You'd be broke.
I'd be broke. This is a special, rare treat, and it's something that is on the fringes of what sake can be. Mm-hmm. But the fact that sake can do this just blows my mind and makes me love the category even more.
Yeah, this is it is super unique, super different. On top of all that, it's quite good.
I want to mention one more thing about aged sake that I think is really unique and that I love about aged sake. We always talk about how long can you keep sake, or drinking it fresh, drinking it young. And I think once a brewery has aged a sake, especially something going to 12 years, this is a stable sake now. So if you have this style of sake in your wine fridge, I think that you can open it up and keep it for a while. You do not need to rush to finish a sake of this depth and maturity. And that is something that I really like. I can have this in my wine fridge. It's been opened. It can continue to mature. When I have friends over to my apartment next and we're on the dessert course, I can break it out, give everyone a little bit, and it is going to taste just as good as today. That's one advantage to getting these a little bit more expensive, but very well-aged sakes is that you can enjoy them for a long time to come.
Excellent.
Well, what did you think of this ancient treasure?
I feel very wealthy right now because I've had a really nice treasure. This does definitely engage that part of my brain that loves whiskey much more than my sake brain. But it's another one of those things like, wow, sake can do this too. And, this is very unique, very interesting stuff.
Yeah. I think that this has been a wonderful example of traditionally aged Koshu that gives us these sherry notes and these whiskey notes and a really lovely dark amber color. But we should have another Koshu episode sometime in the future and try a sake that's been aged at freezing temperatures and see how that affects the outcome. And we can harken back to this episode and contrast and compare. So we'll put a pin in that for the future.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, John, great to taste with you. And so glad we got to share this treasure together.
Yes.
And I also want to thank all of our listeners for tuning in. Thank you so much. We really do hope that you're enjoying our show. If you'd like to show your support for Sake Revolution Podcast, one of the best ways to help us out right now would be to back us on Patreon. We are a listener-supported show and have no advertisements. So the best way to show your support is to back us on Patreon.
Yes, and we do appreciate everyone that supports us. You're supporting us by listening, supporting us by telling your friends, supporting us by writing a review on Apple Podcasts or any other podcast platform of choice. Really helps get the word out about the show. Even if you're sending good vibes, all these things support us. It's great. We love it.
Very much appreciated.
Yes, we do.
And as always, if you would like to learn more about any of the topics or individual sakes that we talked about in today's episode, be sure to visit our website, sakerevolution.com, and it's there that you can check out all of our detailed show notes.
That is right. And also we get nice pictures of labels over there. It's really nice stuff. Good information. And if you have sake questions and you need to have them answered, we have an email address that you should be sending these questions to. It's feedback@sakerevolution.com. So, until next time, everybody, please remember to keep drinking sake And
Kanpai!